Hello viewers. Today we are here to discuss on international market segmentation and selection. This assumes more importance due to growing globalized competition. This topic is very important for students of third year MBA at Dr. Ambedkar Open University. Here we have today Dr. N.R.K. Reddy sir to enlighten us about this topic. He is presently working as Director Academic in the Institute of Shivashivani Institute of Management. He has an over decades of experience in the field of teaching and industry. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, could you please explain us about what is market segmentation?
Yes. International market segmentation assumes more important, as you said, in the light of the growing global competition. Segmentation means it's a process of segregating the markets which are heterogeneous into relatively homogeneous submarkets. This is basically the segmentation is all about. This segmentation assumes more relevance these days because of the growing global competition, as you have rightly pointed out. And when you talk about the international marketing scenario, there is a lot of heterogeneity. This heterogeneity creates greater problems and the situation becomes very complex. Therefore, segmentation is very, very important aspect.
Professor Reddy, could you please explain us what is the difference between globalized market and local market?
Yes, local markets and international markets, or the global markets, if you compare, there is a contrast. Contrast in terms of economics, economically, socially, culturally, these countries differ compared to the domestic market. Because of this heterogeneity in terms of cultures, in terms of what you call the buying behaviors, the segmentation process in the international market is slightly complex compared to the domestic market.
Could you explain the rationale behind globalized segmentation market?
Yes. The very purpose of segmentation in the international market is to identify the right market. Because of the heterogeneity and a greater market at the global level, a company that is trying to enter into the international marketing may not be able to cater to the needs of the globe as a whole. Therefore, it is necessary to identify the target market. That is the first purpose of segmentation. Secondly, these consumers that are spread across the world are also heterogeneous. Because of the consumer heterogeneity, one need to identify the specific consumer requirements. Once you identify the consumer requirements, you will be able to create a niche for yourselves and you will be able to cater to the needs of the specific market. This is the second purpose of global segmentation. Thirdly, the very important one is to understand the consumer behavior. The consumer behavior is influenced by a set of factors which differ from country to country, place to place, and certain other variables like religion and also the political environment of the country also will determine. Therefore, the consumer behavior is also equally important and you need to understand the consumer behavior in the target market. That is the third purpose of segmentation. So fourthly, it is also to identify the profitable markets, or I must say the productive and promising markets. And this is very important because no organization today works for the sake of working. They work for the sake of profits. So profits are very crucial in any organization and its success. As we all know that profit is the blood of business. And without profit, no organization can survive. And money is there in the international business. So money is like honey, which is sweet to everyone. Therefore, it assumes more importance. And the profitability also is one of the criteria in segmentation of the global markets.
Okay. You said earlier that global market differs from local market, domestic markets due to cultural factors, social factors and political factors. But how does these factors help in market selection?
That's right. Economic factors such as growth of gross national product of a country and growth of per capita income of a country, and similarly certain other economic variables like the sectorial composition of the national income. Added to this, the importance of the country, or I must say the stage or the phase of the economic development that is there in the country, also influence to a greater extent the segmentation process. At this juncture, I would like to recall the contribution made by W. Rostow in his stages of economic development. He mentions about 5 different stages. To start with, the traditional society, that's the first stage of economic development, followed by the preconditions for a takeoff. Then third stage is the takeoff stage in the economic development. Fourthly, the concept of drive to maturity. The last stage is the high mass consumption stage. The countries can be classified on the basis of the phases of development. The first one, as we have discussed, is the traditional society. So if the countries are not so much developed, and then you have to segregate that as a poor country, and this is one criteria. Similarly, there may be certain other criteria also, something like taking the per capita GNP as a basis. You can say that the countries are developed, underdeveloped, or growing economies and industrially advanced economies. Like this, you can as well segment the market on the basis of economic factors. Secondly, the social factors. If you take into consideration, in terms of cultures, the countries are different. You say, for example, there are some countries which follow a particular religion.
For example, sir?
For example, you take the Islamic countries. Islamic countries believe in Islam. They have certain set of norms. They are guided by their own, what you call, epics. Therefore, when you enter into such markets, you will be to a greater extent influenced by their culture. And you should take into consideration the concept of culture also in making the decisions with regard to the company that you are trying to get into the international markets.
Should we take into consideration ethical values also?
Yes, that is also important, because the ethical values, which are relative, what is ethical for you and me here may not be ethical for somebody else. So ethical issues also should be taken into consideration. These also influence to a greater extent the buyer behavior. Particularly when you enter into the international markets, the ethical issues play very vital role. For example, lifestyles, pride, prejudice, aesthetics, religion, faith, all these factors influence to a greater extent. As we have really just a few minutes before we have pointed out that the Islamic countries, when you want to enter into the Islamic countries, their culture is different, their value systems are different. When you want to enter into, say, banking business with a high rate of interest and all that, I am referring to the concept of ujri, where you charge exorbitant rates of interest. This business certainly may not be going to grow in such countries because they are against this ujri as per Islam. So when that is the situation, probably you may have to eliminate those markets, and you have to segment your markets differently based on this cultural criteria also.
Professor Reddy, what is the
Yes.
criteria for market segmentation?
Market segmentation can be done on different criterion. Say, for example, in the domestic market, we follow the segmentation based on 5 different criteria, which is very well known to every one of the management students today. Number 1, the geographic segmentation. This geographic segmentation is convenient based on the proximity of the nations, the locational advantages. They will be able to segment the markets. In the light of this geographical segmentation, I would like to give you certain benefits of this geographical segmentation. Number one, because of the proximity, in terms of the transport costs, in terms of the communication costs, you will be able to save a lot of money in that front. Added to this, there is also feeling among the management scientists today. When the countries are taken which are neighboring countries, there is a greater possibility that the cultures also match, or the cultural difference that we talk about in the neighboring countries is very limited. Therefore, in terms of culture, in terms of economies, there is a greater possibility of having similarity or homogeneity. Therefore, we talk about the geographical segmentation as one of the criteria for segmentation. International markets can be segmented or basically on the demographic front. Demographic front in the sense that based on the total population, you can categorize the markets into, say for example, the males and females. This is one criteria based on sex. Similarly, you can within the population again you can segregate like what you call the children population, the adults population, the senior citizens. This is another classification that we can talk about. So this is also important because you will be able to cater to the needs of the total population, a particular segment of the total population. Thirdly, the psychographic front. The psychographic segmentation is based on the attitudes of the people, their lifestyles of the people. Basically, we are talking about the behavioral aspects. Fourth aspect is buyer behavior. Buyer behavior in the sense some of them are leaders in buying, some of them are followers in buying. Therefore, you need to talk about the buyer's behavior also when you are segmenting the markets. Lastly, but not the least, the very important point that has to be taken into consideration as far as the segmentation is concerned is on the basis of volume. What is the volume of the purchases that are being made for the sake of say industrial market? You buy in bulk, and for a domestic market it is going to be what you call limited market. Therefore, on these 5 fronts you will be able to segment the market into different categories or sub-markets.
Does this segmentation also implies for international marketing also?
Yes, but not directly, with some modifications. There is a lot of divergence in the international market scenario in terms of cultures, in terms of economic factors, in terms of religion and all that. Therefore, the segmentation that you adapt for the domestic market may not be directly applied to the international market. But with some modifications, you will be able to apply the same sort of criteria. Secondly, based on the political factors also, you can segment the international market. And the countries which are following the democratic governance, the countries which are following socialistic pattern of government, and the countries which are following laissez-faire economies, for example, the free economies, free enterprise economies. These are the classifications on which you can as well do this sort of segmentation in the international market. But as far as the cultures are concerned, there is a lot of divergence across the nations in terms of culture. So culture and religion also play a vital role in the international market scenario.
Sir, what would be the result of segmentation?
Yes, after the segmentation, one need to tangibly measure the benefits out of segmentation. And segmentation should result in 5 different benefits, which are expressed in terms of an acronym called SMARP. S represents sizability, M represents measurability, A represents accessibility, R represents reliability, P represents profitability. Let us see what is this SMARP is all about. Size of the market. Once you segment the market, we should be in a position to identify the size of the market. After segmentation, you are clear about the size of the market. If the market size is very big, probably a small company may not be able to cater to the needs of the entire global market. And if the market size is very small in terms of volume, probably economically it may not be beneficial. Therefore, you need to decide about the size of the market. Again, you take into consideration your own internal strengths to match with the requirements of the market. Based on that, you will be able to decide the size of the market that you are going to operate. Second component is the measurability. How do you measure the tangible benefits out of what you call the segmentation process? That is also very important, wherein you are talking about the consumer behavior and what are the behavioral aspects of the consumer, to what extent we will be able to meet the requirements of the consumers. This is the second component. Thirdly, the accessibility. With all this segmentation and effort that you have put in for segmentation and all that, you will be able to identify the market. But will this market be accessible to you is also the question. If you are not able to meet the requirement of the market, and if you are not able to access the market which you have identified, maybe because it's a bigger in size and you are not able to manage, and the very purpose of segmentation is defeated. The fourth one is the reliability. When you talk about the international markets, everybody feels that the international markets are what you call risky, and there is a lot of uncertainty in the business. The reason is simple, that these international markets are new to us and you are not exposed to this type of environment, and the cultural, economic, social, religious factors again influence the setting of the economic factors, setting of the economy. You are investing huge amounts in the international business in capturing the international market, and in the long run, if the markets are going to be disappearing, probably all the investments that you make is going to be a futile exercise. Then the last one is the profitability, which is very, very crucial. We have discussed about this profitability in the international market a few minutes before. This profitability assumes more importance when you enter into the international markets. The reason is simple, that when you are exporting a product to other country and trying to capture the international market, now the product that you are talking about may not be directly suitable to the international customers. Therefore, there is a need for probably some sort of modification in the product. You need to what you call modify the product or adapt, which involves a lot of costs. That's one component. So the point that we are driving home now is the cost escalation because of the adaptation. Added to this, the transportation costs, and as market requirements demand a better packaging, these factors escalate the costs. This is one cost component. And to see the tangible profit or benefits, we need to talk about costs as well as the revenues. Revenues are further determined by two factors: the price and the volume of market, or the quantity of sales. When you talk about the price factor in the international market, the exchange ratios, to what extent the price can be manipulated, or in terms of the other currency, what is the price that you are going to get. Therefore, the price factor is one. Similarly, the quantity put together will determine the revenues. Any company would be interested in maximizing profit. When you talk about maximization of profit, it can be done in two ways. One is by reducing the cost. I am talking about the cost effective production methods. Secondly, to increase the revenues. When you say increasing revenues, it can be done through better marketing skills, increase the market share, as well as bargain for a higher price, which will further enhance the profitability of the company. Finally, this is talking about the cost on the one hand, revenues on the other hand. One need to manage, but an intelligent manager of an international business company should look into both. He has to do left and right. Both on the one hand reduce the cost, on the other hand increase the revenues, so that the profitability can increase without any difficulty.
Then you mean to say that all these are based, a company will be based on decisions what you have said whatever earlier. But what would be the company's strength?
The strength of the company is also going to be a very crucial factor in capturing the international market. When I say the company's crucial factors, you are talking about the internal environment of business. That is, what are the strengths of the company in capturing the international market? You need to make a SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. And instead of calling it as a weakness, it's a better way to call it as a constraints. Therefore, instead of calling it a SWOT analysis, we call it as a SCOT analysis these days. So when you talk about SCOT analysis, you need to take into account what are the strengths of the company in terms of the resources and what are the strengths of the market that is available to you in the international market. So this can be explained with the help of a grid, wherein you are talking about, on the one hand, the competitiveness or the competitive strength of the country on the one hand, secondly, the country's attractiveness. And if you look at the first segment of the grid, this segment talks about invest, grow patterns, which means high level of marketing commitment is required, high level of market commitment, investment in people and capital necessary to match the products of the markets. This is the first segment, which is invest grow segment. Secondly, high attraction and low strength is the second segmentation. And in this segment, you need to build the market because the high attraction is there, but the low strength, you need to build or you need to fortify your strengths in order to make the perfect match between the requirement of the company and the country's requirements in terms of market. So therefore, in this case, you need to have huge finances, you need to have a long-term planning, and you need to wait for the profits also in the long run. This is the second phase. The third segment in the grid is talking about harvest, divest, and a combined situation, wherein we talk about low strengths and low company attractiveness. In this situation, it's a better you drop out from the market, and this is not going to be a profitable market for you in future course of time. Probably what you need to do is, at the earliest, you abandon the market and get out of the business. And fourth one is very crucial and which is a promising sector is the selectivity strategies, wherein the business opportunities that are there in the international marketing are not very unattractive, or I may say there is a neutrality in the business, in the sense neither attractive nor unattractive. In such case, if you got finances, if you got a strength in terms of human resources and financial resources, you will be able to build the market and then cater to the needs of the market. And probably this is going to be a very, very promising market in the international scenario for a company that is in question.
So what would be the next step for international marketing segmentation?
It is simple. After segmentation, the market selection comes next. In the market selection, what we talk about is based on the company's strengths and based on the requirements of the market, you need to choose a given market and you have to carve a niche for yourselves and then say this is the market where I am going to operate based on certain strengths of mine.
How do we select a particular country for its market?
The company has to study the international market and its characteristics in detail, and you need to find out what is the requirement of the market. Do I have these resources or strengths to match the requirement of the market? When you are clear about these two things, you need to build a perfect match between the market requirements and the company strengths. If there is a perfect match, you can choose that as a global market for you to operate.
What constitutes country market factors? Could you briefly explain about it?
Sure. The country market factors include, one is the production factors, other one is the market factors, the third component is the marketing factors. When I talk about production factors, the nature of the product is going to determine the market for you. When you are segmenting the markets, based on the product that you have in your mind, you will be able to choose the market in the international scenario. Now, when we talk about the product, the nature of the product, what is the type of the product that you are trying to sell in the international market? That is going to be very, very crucial. And you also see what is the position of this particular product that you have in your mind in the international product life cycle curve. When you fit the international product life cycle curve on the two-dimensional plane, you will be able to know whether your product is in the introductory stage or at the growth stage or maturity stage or at the declining stage. So, in the international product life cycle, where exactly your product is fixing, this is going to be the first component in a country's market factors.
Professor Reddy, could you please explain us company factors influencing market selection?
Yes, the company factors refer to the internal strengths of the company. When we talk about the internal strength of the company, what are the abilities of the company to cater to the needs of the global market? In terms of the financial resources, in terms of human resources, what is the expertise that the company has to export, what is the past experience, and what is the ability of the company to bear with the risk, particularly the management perception about the risk.
How can a new technologically new product can take similar analysis?
I feel with regard to the new product, there is no absolutely new product. In case there is a new product, probably it is emerging as a new product through only the evolutionary process. In such case, there is always a substitute which is available, and that can be taken as a proxy.
After segmentation and selection, what would be the next step?
The next step after the segmentation is going to be the formulation of the strategy. The business strategy has to be formulated on the basis of the objectives, and once the objectives are formed, and you need to have an account of the resources that are available in the country, in the company with regard to human resources and the financial resources, and then you have to make a plan to execute this plan and see that you reach the goals.
In case strategy fails, what should we do?
Yes, it's a very pertinent question. In case the strategy fails, you should have a contingency plan also. Therefore, it's better when you are formulating a strategy, also create a contingency plan that will be of handy to you and helpful to you when the strategy fails.
Thank you, Professor Reddy. We had very excellent exposure on this topic and sharing your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.